My sister called my autistic son a monster at every family gathering, so I recorded her, played it at Thanksgiving, and made sure she was never invited again. I know that sounds dramatic typed out like that, but there is only so many times you can watch someone go after your kid before something and you just snap sideways instead of bending again. I am 34, my husband is 36, I will call him Trent. We have one child, our son Felix. He is 7, he was diagnosed on the spectrum when he was 4, he is bright, funny, obsessed with elevators and wind turbines, and if you ask him about either of those things, he will talk until he has used up all the oxygen in the room in the best possible way. He flaps his hands when he is excited, he has noise-canceling headphones he wears when things get loud, and he hates tags in clothes. With an intensity one did not know a person could feel toward fabric. My sister, I will call her Naomi, is 38. She lives about 20 minutes from my parents in one of those condo complexes with identical brick fronts and tiny balconies. She works in what she calls behavior consulting for corporate clients, which from what I understand mostly involves telling people how to talk to each other in meetings so they do not get sued. She has no kids and has always been very vocal about how that is a choice, which is fine. What is not fine is that somewhere along the line she decided that gave her a license to judge everyone who does have children like we are all contestants on some show she is critiquing. Growing up, she and I had that classic older sister younger sister thing. She was the one with the car first, the one who knew what to wear to look like she did not care, the one who could talk our dad out of grounding us if she wanted to. She was also the one who called me sensitive whenever I cried, who told me I was too much when I got excited, who rolled her eyes when I talked about anything I cared about for more than 30 seconds. I did not have words for it back then, but looking back, I was probably a lot like Felix. I just never got evaluated. I learned pretty early that the way I experienced the world annoyed people if I did not sand the edges off. Naomi was one of the people doing the sanding. When Felix was little, before his diagnosis, Naomi was fine in that distant aunt way. She would show up to birthdays with educational toys, make a couple of comments about how we were letting him watch too many cartoons, and then talk to the adults about her trips to conferences in other cities. After we got the diagnosis, which honestly was a relief more than anything, like finally having a name for the thing we were already living with, Naomi's tone changed. She got this tightness around her mouth whenever his name came up. She started sending me links to articles about diets and brain training programs that promised miracles. When I told her we were following the recommendations from his actual medical team, she made a face and said of course I would trust strangers in lab coats more than family. I should have taken that as a bigger red flag than I did. The first time she called him a monster, we were at my parents' place for my dad's birthday. My parents live in a long low ranch house on the edge of town, big front window that looks out over a narrow strip of grass and then a drainage canal. Inside, the living room is this mix of old and new, the same bulky sofa they have had since I was in middle school, a new big screen TV my dad is way too proud of, shelves filled with photo frames and little souvenirs from their rare vacations. Felix was in the hallway playing with a small toy train he had brought, rolling it back and forth against the baseboard, humming to himself. There were a lot of people, cousins, neighbors. The noise level was climbing. He had taken his headphones off because someone made a comment about not being able to hear him, and he was starting to get that glassy-eyed look that means he is about 10 seconds from overload. I was in the kitchen helping my mom slice fruit. I heard Naomi's voice from the hallway, not loud, but with that sharp edge she uses when she thinks she is being clever. She was telling one of our cousin's kids, who is about Felix's age, that he should not copy Felix, because then he would act like a little monster too. I froze, my hand halfway through slicing an apple. My mom kept moving like she had not heard. Maybe she did not. Maybe she has trained herself not to. I walked into the hallway, asked Naomi what she had just said. She smiled, the kind of smile that does not touch your eyes, said she was just joking around, that I should relax, that the kids did not even notice. I looked at Felix. He was staring down at his train, hands pressed against his thighs, his breathing faster. He definitely noticed. I told her not to call my son that again. She shrugged, said I was being overly sensitive. I wish I could tell you that was the last time that I put my foot down and everyone rallied, but that is not what happened. Over the next year, it became this pattern. At every family gathering, Naomi would find a way to get Felix alone, not totally alone. There was always someone else around, but removed enough that she could drop little comments. If he flapped his hands, she would lean toward another adult and whisper something about how he looked like some kind of creature. When he lined up his cars instead of playing the way she thought he should, she would tell the other kids not to get too close, or they might catch whatever he had. She called him a storm, a problem, a ticking situation, and yes, a monster, more than once. Every time I caught her, it was the same thing. She would deny, say I misheard, or that she had been talking about something else, or that I was twisting her words because I was looking for a reason to be angry with her. My parents hovered somewhere between willful ignorance and discomfort. My mom would change the subject. My dad would send Felix to another room to play, as if separating them fixed the root issue. Trent was livid. He wanted to stop going to gatherings altogether. I kept thinking we could manage it, that surely if we explained enough, if we pointed out how hurtful it was, Naomi would stop. I have no idea why I believed that as long as I did. The breaking point for me was at a backyard barbecue my parents hosted at the end of summer. We were all out on the patchy grass behind their house, folding chairs set up in a loose circle, my uncle at the grill, kids running around, the usual. Felix was sitting on a small folding stool near the back fence, watching the neighbor's wind chime spin in the breeze. You could almost see him cataloging how fast each piece moved. Naomi walked over to him, crouched down. I watched from a few feet away, trying not to hover too obviously. She picked up his stool slightly, tipped it back and forth, said something in a low voice. His shoulders tensed. She did it again, tilting him, like it was a game. He made a small distressed sound, the kind he makes when something is not funny but he is not sure if he is allowed to say so. I stepped closer, heard her say that if he did not learn how to sit like a normal boy, everyone would always think he was some kind of little monster. She used that word again, like it was cute, like she had coined a clever nickname. I stepped between them, took the stool gently from her hand, helped Felix stand, told him to go inside and get his headphones if he wanted. He bolted for the sliding door, his cheeks flushed. I turned to Naomi, my voice shaking, told her to stop calling him that it was not funny, that he understands more than she thinks. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might disappear into her head, said I was ruining his chances at a normal life by acting like any criticism was abuse, that if I did not toughen up he would walk all over me and everyone else. That was the point where something in me went cold. Up until then, I had been trying to fix it like a miscommunication, as if I just found the right words, she would see. In that moment I realized she saw perfectly well, she just did not care. On the drive home, Trent gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. He asked me how many more times I was going to let her hurt our son before I did something that actually stuck. I started to say I was doing things. I had confronted her. I had talked to my parents. He cut me off gently, not yelling, just firm, asked what had changed. Had she stopped? Had they stepped in? The answers were no across the board. I lay awake that night, listening to the hum of the fan in the corner of our bedroom, staring at the faint patterns of light from the street outside, playing every encounter with Naomi over in my head, every time my parents had smoothed it over, every time I had swallowed my anger for the sake of keeping the peace, a phrase I was starting to hate. I thought about Felix's face when she tipped his stool, the way his mouth had tightened, how he had not cried because he has learned that crying makes adults uncomfortable, and uncomfortable adults make bad decisions. That was when I decided I was done trying to convince anyone with only my word. If the people who supposedly loved both of us needed proof to take me seriously, then I was going to give it to them in a way they could not ignore. I live in a state where as long as one person in a conversation knows they are recording, it is legal. Trent confirmed that before we did anything. He works in compliance for a financial firm and is weirdly thrilled whenever he gets to look up statutes for personal reasons. I did not go to a lawyer, did not hire a private investigator. I just opened the voice recorder app on my phone, practiced locking the screen without stopping the recording, and started making a habit of slipping it into my pocket with the microphone facing up every time we went to a family gathering. At first I felt ridiculous, creeping around my parents' house with my phone recording in my jeans pocket, half expecting someone to ask why I kept adjusting the way my shirt fell, but nobody noticed, or if they did, they chalked it up to me fidgeting. Felix was nervous at the next get-together, clung to Trent more than usual, but Naomi was in rare form. It was like she could sense I was at my limit and decided to push. At a brunch my mom hosted to celebrate my cousin graduating from a training program, Felix was sitting at the dining table, tracing the pattern in the tablecloth with his finger, humming under his breath. Naomi leaned over him, close enough that I wanted to step in, and asked why he always had to make noise. She told him if he kept doing that at school, they would think he was a monster trying to crawl out of his own skin. The word hit me like an actual physical shove. I saw my phone on the sideboard where I had left it, cursed myself for forgetting to start a recording, but then I remembered, I had put it in my pocket when we came in and hit the button on the porch. I excused myself to the bathroom for a second, checked the screen, the red timer was still ticking, my heart was pounding. I had gotten it, her tone, the exact words, all of it. Knowing it was there did not magically make everything better, but it felt like the first solid step I had taken in a long time. Over the next 2 gatherings, I collected more, small clips, Naomi calling Felix dramatic when he covered his ears during a loud argument between 2 cousins in the living room, her telling my mom in a low voice that it was not normal for a boy his age to be so attached to a stuffed rabbit he sometimes carried, that it was like living with a creature that never settled. She used that word again, creature, always skirting just close enough to monstrous that it was hard to argue she meant anything else. I never prompted her, never baited her, I did not need to. She had made a habit of commenting on him, of framing him as a problem. All I had to do was be nearby with my phone in my pocket and let her hang herself with her own words. By the time fall rolled around, I had enough audio that even someone desperate to give her the benefit of the doubt would have to squint hard to pretend she was joking. Thanksgiving was coming up. For my parents, that is the big holiday, more than winter holidays, more than birthdays. It is the one time of year they insist everyone comes, siblings, cousins, neighbors, whoever is in town. They borrow extra chairs from the community rec center down the street. My dad spends 3 days talking about how he is going to perfect the timing of getting everything on the table hot at the same time. My mom polishes the same mismatched set of serving dishes she has been hauling out of the cabinet since I was a kid. A week before, my mom called, asked what time we were planning to arrive. I told her we were coming but that if Naomi was going to be there needed to be a conversation about how she talks about Felix. My mom sighed, that long weary sound she has perfected, said she did not want drama, that it was just one day, that if I could just ignore Naomi, we could all enjoy ourselves. I told her ignoring abuse does not make it disappear. She said that was a strong word. I said it was the right one. She changed the subject. That night, Trent and I sat at our kitchen table, the one with the slightly dented corner from when we moved in, my laptop open between us, headphones plugged in. I played him the clips I had collected. We had not listened to all of them together yet. I had been weirdly protective of them, like they were some kind of dark secret. He sat there, his jaw getting tighter with each one. When the last one, the brunch comment about school and monsters, played, he took off the headphones, stared at the table for a long moment, then asked what I wanted to do with them. I told him the truth, that part of me wanted to just email them to everyone in the family with a subject line that said this is what you have been letting happen, that another part of me wanted to blast them out the speakers at the next gathering, like some kind of twisted soundtrack. He suggested mailing a flash drive to Naomi with a note. I laughed, said she would claim we had edited them, that we were trying to make her look bad. He was quiet, then said if we were going to do anything, we should do it where nobody could pretend they had not heard. My dad had just bought himself a new wireless speaker, one of those chunky rectangular ones with way more volume than any living room strictly needs. He had shown it off to us at the barbecue, made a big deal about how he could connect it to any phone in the house. He was proud of figuring out the app. I remembered that as Trent and I sat at the table, the idea came together so quickly it almost scared me, like my brain had been building it in the background for weeks and just dropped it into my conscious thoughts fully formed. I told Trent I wanted to use the speaker at Thanksgiving. He raised his eyebrows, asked how. I said my dad always makes everyone sit down before they start passing dishes. He likes to say a few words. Sometimes he plays a song he thinks fits the mood. All we had to do was ask if we could play something too. My heart was racing just talking about it. Part of me felt like a teenager planning a prank. Another part felt like a general planning a battle. We spent the next few evenings picking and organizing clips. I went through everything I had recorded, clipped out the parts where Naomi was clearly talking about Felix, preserved the context so it could not be brushed off. Trent helped me arrange them in order, not to be clever, but to show a pattern, the casual cruelty building over time. I did not edit her words, did not add anything, just trimmed my own responses out as much as possible. I wanted her voice and my son's name to be the only focus. I saved the file on my phone, gave it a boring name, something like Notes Backup. In case anyone glanced at the screen, Trent tested the connection to our own old speaker at home, made sure the volume levels were clear but not distorted. Each time we listened, my stomach twisted, hearing her call my child a monster in her light, almost amused tone, but it also hardened my resolve. Thanksgiving Day came, gray and chilly, the kind of weather where the sky feels heavy even though it is not raining. We drove to my parents' house in the late morning, Felix in the back seat with his headphones on, tapping his fingers against his thighs in a rhythm I recognized as his current favorite song. Trent and I exchanged glances now and then, silent check-ins. Once we parked and sat for a moment in the driveway, he asked again if I was sure. I said no, but that I was more sure about this than about doing nothing. Inside, the house smelled like roasting turkey and a synthetic pine candle my mom always lights too early. The TV in the living room was showing a parade, volume just loud enough to be distracting. My dad bustled around in an apron someone had given him years ago that said something about being the boss of the kitchen. He grinned when he saw us, hugged Felix, asked if he was ready for pie later. Felix nodded. Still wearing his headphones, he was carrying a small notebook he uses to draw wind turbines. He found a corner and settled in with it. Naomi arrived about 20 minutes after us. She walked in like nothing had ever happened, air-kissing the room, complimenting my mom's centerpiece, telling my dad he looked very official in his apron. She glanced at Felix, gave him a small wave. He did not look up. I watched her like a hawk, my phone heavy in my pocket. I felt like I had swallowed a handful of ice. We made it through the initial chaos of people arriving, putting coats on the bed in the spare room, the kids finding each other and running up and down the hallway. My dad called everyone to the table. There were folding chairs borrowed from the rec center, the extension leaf in the table, everything squeezed into the dining room, which is really just one end of the main space by the big front window. My mom had laid out mismatched plates, the good silverware, cloth napkins. She only uses this one day a year. My dad stood at the head of the table, his new speaker on the sideboard next to the mashed potatoes. He cleared his throat, tapped his glass with a spoon, made a little speech about being grateful everyone was together, about hoping next year would be even better, the usual. Then he picked up his phone, said he wanted to play a song he had found, something he thought everyone would like. As he fumbled with his screen, I stepped closer, heart racing. I said quietly that I also had something I would like to play after, if that was okay. He smiled, said sure, the more the merrier. He connected his phone to the speaker. A soft jazz track started playing. Everyone listened politely for about 30 seconds, then went back to talking quietly as it became background noise. When it ended, my dad turned to disconnect. I touched his arm lightly, asked if I could connect mine. He handed me the speaker like it was no big deal. I opened the app, selected my device. My fingers were shaking. Trent put his hand on the small of my back, a tiny anchor. I cleared my throat. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. I told everyone that before we started eating. There was something important I needed them to hear. My mom looked wary. My dad looked confused. Naomi looked mildly annoyed, like I was delaying her from getting to the stuffing. I hit play. At first, there was just a second of room noise. Then Naomi's voice came out of the speaker, clear as day, that slightly amused tone as she told Felix at the brunch that if he kept humming at school, the teachers would think he was a monster trying to crawl out of his own skin. The room went dead silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. My mom's eyes widened. My dad's mouth actually dropped open a little. Naomi's face went pale, then flushed. I let it play, clip after clip, her telling another adult at a different gathering that being around Felix felt like being in a room with a tiny storm that never shut off, that sometimes she thought of him as a little monster spinning in circles, her leaning over him near the back fence and warning him that if he did not learn to sit like a normal boy, people would always see him as something other than human. My own voice popped up a few times, telling her to stop, her brushing me off, saying I was overreacting, saying I was too sensitive, her tone somewhere between indulgent and exasperated. Nobody moved, even the kids got quiet, sensing something was off. Felix had taken his headphones off when the speaker started. He was now staring at the table, his hands clenched in his lap. I watched his face as his own name came out of the speaker, followed by that word again and again, monster. It made my chest ache, but I needed him to know that this was not in his head, that I had heard, that I was doing something about it. When the last clip ended, there was a moment of pure stillness. You could have heard a pin drop on the tablecloth. Then my mom started babbling, saying this was not fair, that I had taken things out of context, that everyone says things they do not mean, that recording family was a violation. My dad put a hand on her arm, told her to stop. His eyes were still on Naomi, who was staring at me like she could not decide whether to cry or grab the speaker and throw it out the window. I took a breath that felt like it scraped the inside of my lungs, told the room, and Naomi in particular, that I was done pretending this was all in my head, that I was done listening to her call my son a monster in corners and hallways while everyone else looked the other way. I said I had asked her to stop, more than once, that I had asked my parents to step in, that nothing had changed, that the only thing left was to show everyone what she actually said when she thought nobody would hold her accountable. Naomi finally spoke, her voice higher than usual. She said I had betrayed her trust, that I had made private moments into some kind of public trial, that she was just worried about Felix and did not know how else to express it. She tried to spin it, said she used that word in a playful way, that she did not mean it literally, that Felix did not even understand. I cut her off, pointed at my son, who was very clearly understanding that his aunt had been calling him something awful over and over. I told her she did not get to decide how her words landed. My mom started crying, saying this was ruining the holiday, that we should turn it off and move on. My dad looked at me, really looked, and then did something I did not expect. He told Naomi to apologize, not one of her if you were offended apologies, but a real one, to Felix. He said he could not ignore what he had just heard, that it was cruel. Naomi stared at him like he had slapped her. She said she would not be humiliated like this, that we were ganging up on her. She grabbed her bag, stood up, announced that she did not have to sit there and be attacked, and headed toward the front door. My mom scrambled after her, calling her name. My dad sat back down heavily, staring at his plate. The rest of the table stayed frozen. Nobody knew what to do. Felix slid off his chair, walked around the table, and pressed himself against my side. I wrapped an arm around him, felt him tremble. I told my parents, calm but very clear, that Naomi was no longer welcome around my son, that as far as I was concerned, she was not part of his life anymore. My mom looked at me like I had said I was moving to another planet. She started to argue. I held up my free hand, told her I was not debating this, that if they wanted to see us, it would have to be without her, that I would not sit through another holiday watching her poke at Felix like he was an experiment. After that, Thanksgiving kind of fell apart. Some people quietly started putting food into containers, others drifted into the living room, conversations were hushed. Trent suggested we go home. I agreed. We gathered our things, helped Felix with his coat. My dad walked us to the door. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. He hugged Felix, then me, whispered that he was sorry he had not listened sooner. I believed him, but I also knew sorry did not undo what had already been done. In the car on the way home, Felix finally spoke, his voice small. He asked why Aunt Naomi called him a monster. The word sounded huge in his mouth. Trent gripped the wheel. I closed my eyes for a second, then told him that sometimes grown-ups say unkind things because they do not understand, that it was not true, that he was not a monster, that he was my favorite person in the world. He was quiet for a long time, then asked if he had to see her again. I said no, he did not. He relaxed a little. In his seat, looked out the window at the passing houses, his reflection small in the glass. I thought that would be the end of it. I had exposed her, set a boundary, everything was out in the open, but people do not like having their illusions shattered, and families definitely do not like being forced to pick sides. The weeks after Thanksgiving proved that in ways I was not fully prepared for. Update 3 weeks later. I did not expect my sister to call the school and my parents to threaten to take us to some kind of family mediation, but apparently exposing someone publicly makes them desperate to claw back control, even if it means swinging wildly and hitting things that should have been off limits. The days right after Thanksgiving were this odd mix of quiet and background noise. Our house was calmer than it had been before the holiday, almost like some knot had loosened, but my phone might as well have been a small fire in my hand every time it lit up. My mom sent a couple of messages, long ones, about how we had embarrassed Naomi, how she was fragile right now, how I should have talked to her privately instead of ambushing her. She used that word, as if I had not tried the private route half a dozen times before. I did not respond at first, then I sent one short message saying that nothing about what I had done was about humiliating Naomi, it was about protecting Felix, and that if she wanted to talk to me, she needed to start from the place of acknowledging what Naomi had said. She did not answer that, which told me plenty. Naomi herself stayed quiet for a while, which almost worried me more than if she had started yelling. Silence from her has never meant peace, it has always meant planning. About a week later, I got a call from the school social worker. My heart did that drop thing again. She asked if it was a good time to talk. My mind immediately went to Felix. Had something happened? Had he had a meltdown? Had someone been unkind? I said yes, braced myself. She told me, in that careful professional voice people use when they know they are about to say something upsetting, that the school had received an anonymous report expressing concern about Felix's home environment and emotional well-being. I felt the room tilt for a second. I was standing in our small laundry area, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear, a basket of clean clothes at my feet. I asked what the report had said specifically. She explained that the person had claimed Felix was being isolated, that we were allegedly not letting him see family, that we were framing him as fragile and different, that we were making a big deal out of his diagnosis to the point of creating anxiety in him. I had to put my hand on the wall to steady myself. I told her the truth, that we had recently cut off contact with one family member who had repeatedly used hurtful language toward him, that our decision to limit that relationship was exactly the opposite of isolating him. It was about making sure the people around him were safe. She listened, then sighed, said these kinds of reports were unfortunately not uncommon, that they had to follow up, but that she knew us, knew Felix, had seen how we interacted at school meetings and events, and did not have any concerns based on what she actually observed. She said something that stuck with me, that sometimes when families have conflicts, people try to use systems like the school as tools in their personal battles, and that it rarely works the way they think. I thanked her for letting me know, hung up, and immediately called Trent at work. He answered on the second ring. I told him what had happened. There was a long pause, then he asked, in this flat voice, if I thought it was Naomi. We both knew the answer, even if we did not say it out loud. I did not have proof. The report had been anonymous, but the language, the timing, the focus on not letting him see family all matched the conversation we had had at Thanksgiving. It felt like the kind of move someone makes when they are used to being believed by authority figures and cannot stand that. For once, they were not. That night, after Felix was in bed, Trent Trent and I sat in the living room, the only light coming from the table lamp next to the sofa, my phone on the coffee table like a third person in the conversation. He asked what I wanted to do: file a complaint, confront Naomi, tell my parents. I felt exhausted just thinking about any of it, but I also felt this cold anger rising. The idea that she had dragged Felix's school into this, that she had tried to create a record of concern attached to his name, made me see red in a way that her words alone, awful as they were, had not. I decided to document, not because I thought it would fix anything immediately, but because at this point, I wanted a written log of every escalation. I opened a notebook, wrote down the date, the time of the call, the social worker's name, what she had said. It felt clinical, but also grounding, like I was refusing to let this all live only as a swirl of dread in my head. 2 days after the school call, my dad rang, his name popping up on my screen while I was making dinner. The kitchen smelled like onions and garlic. Felix was in the next room building a tower out of blocks, narrating quietly to himself. I hesitated, then answered. My dad's voice was strained. He said he and my mom had been talking, that they thought we needed to get some kind of neutral help. I asked what he meant. He said one of their friends from their neighborhood association had mentioned a family mediation service at the community center on the other side of town. I had to take a second to process that. My parents were genuinely suggesting we sit in a room with a stranger to talk about whether it was okay for Naomi to call my son a monster. I asked him that, point blank. He said it was not about the word, it was about the way I had handled it. The recording, the public playing. He said they felt caught in the middle, that they loved all of us, that they did not want to lose either daughter. I pointed out that suggesting mediation when only one person had done something wrong was not neutral, it was taking a side. He did not like that, said I was making this harder than it had to be. I asked if Naomi had said anything about the school call. He went quiet, which told me everything. I pushed, asked if she had been complaining about us not letting her see Felix, about us turning him against her. He sighed, admitted she had said something along those lines, but that she was upset, that I needed to understand how hurt she was by what I had done. I laughed then, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of it all hit me at once. My son had been called a monster. For months, the person who did it had then tried to bring his school into it, and somehow in my parents' heads, she was the one wounded party needing understanding. I told my dad, calmly but firmly, that I was not interested in mediation, that I did not trust any process that treated my decision to protect my son as equal to Naomi's decision to emotionally abuse him. He started to interrupt. I kept talking, told him that if he and my mom wanted to be in our lives, it would be on the condition that they accepted the boundary I had set. That Naomi was not to be around Felix, no exceptions, no gradual re-entry, no giving her another chance unless it was on my terms. He said that was unreasonable, that family had to compromise. I said I had been compromising for years and look where it had gotten us. He ended the call with a weary, "We will talk later." I put my phone down, stirred the pan on the stove a little too hard, sauce splashing up the sides. Felix wandered in, asked if dinner was almost ready. I forced a smile, told him yes, tried to keep my voice light. Trent came up behind me, put his hands on my shoulders. Just for a second, a silent question. I shook my head slightly. That was all we needed in that moment. The next escalation did not come through my family, it came through Trent's. His sister Mariah invited us to a small gathering at her apartment a couple of weeks after all this. She lives in a converted factory building on the edge of downtown. High ceilings, big windows, exposed beams. The kind of place Naomi would make a comment about being impractical. Mariah has always been good with Felix. She asks him about his interests without making a big show of how tolerant she is. She rearranges things in her space without drawing attention to it so he has a quiet corner if he needs it. We needed a break from the constant tension. Halfway through the evening, when people were picking at snacks and chatting in little clusters, Mariah pulled me aside into her tiny office nook, closed the sliding door just enough for privacy but not so much that it would feel like a secret meeting. She looked uncomfortable, told me she had run into Naomi at a local community event, some sort of fundraiser her company was sponsoring. Naomi had apparently walked right up to her, all fake pleasantness, and started talking about how worried she was about Felix, how she felt she needed to intervene because we were allegedly keeping him from extended family, painting him as fragile, how she wished people would listen to her expertise about behavior. Mariah said she had let her talk for about 60 seconds before cutting in, telling her calmly that if Naomi was truly worried about Felix, she should probably stop calling him names, that she had heard the recording, that it was awful, that she was not interested in being recruited into any campaign against us. Naomi had apparently gone very still, then said she could not believe we had shared the recording outside the family, which made me snort when I heard it, as if she had some right to expect privacy for the things she had chosen to say repeatedly. Hearing that Naomi was now trying to pull Trent's family into her narrative was infuriating, but it also backfired on her, because unlike my parents, Trent's family has a much lower tolerance for that kind of thing. Mariah told her in no uncertain terms that she believed us, that she supported us, and then walked away, leaving Naomi standing there, allegedly sputtering. On the drive home from Mariah's, I realized something. Naomi's power in our family had always come from this assumption that she was the one who saw things clearly, that she was the rational one, the successful one, the one with the big job and the competent voice. My parents, and some of my relatives had defaulted to trusting her perspective over mine for years, hearing that, outside that bubble, her behavior was immediately recognized for what it was, petty and cruel, was weirdly liberating. It did not fix my relationship with my parents, it did not make Naomi vanish, but it reminded me that the version of reality she was pushing was not universal. It was just loud in that specific circle, and circles can be redrawn. A few days after that, I got a card in the mail, actual paper, handwritten. The return address was my parents' house. I almost did not open it, but curiosity got me. Inside was a short note from my mom. In her careful cursive, she wrote that she loved me, that she loved Felix, that she did not agree with how I had handled things, but that she did not want this to be permanent. She asked if we could at least consider attending a winter holiday gathering, for the sake of the season, as she put it. I sat at the kitchen counter with that card in my hand for a long time. Felix was at the table drawing a detailed cross-section of an elevator shaft. Trent was on the floor assembling a small bookshelf. I could hear the faint sound of a neighbor's radio through the walls. The whole scene felt very grounded, very ours. The idea of stepping back into my parents' house, of sitting at their table with Naomi, was like imagining walking back into a burning room because you left a picture frame inside. I picked up a pen, flipped the card over, wrote one line. I told her we would be happy to see her and my dad at our house, on a day that worked for them, as long as they came alone. No mediation, no surprise guests, no speeches about forgiveness, just a short visit to see their grandson in the environment where he felt safe. I signed my name. Trent added a quick note in the margin saying the same thing in his voice. We mailed it the next morning. A week went by, no response, then another. I assumed that was my answer. Then, out of nowhere, my dad texted a simple message, asking if they could come by for an afternoon the following week. Just them. I showed Trent, my stomach flipping. I told Felix his grandparents wanted to visit, asked if he felt okay about that. He shrugged, said as long as they did not bring Aunt Naomi. I told him they would not. He nodded, went back to his drawing. The day they came, the sky was that flat winter gray, the air dry. They knocked at the door at the time they had said. No extra car in the driveway, just theirs. I opened the door, saw my mom clutching a small tin, probably cookies, my dad behind her, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. They both looked uncertain in a way I had not seen before, stepping into my house instead of me stepping into theirs. They took off their shoes in the entryway without me having to ask, which for some reason made me feel a little less guarded. Felix peeked around the corner, saw them, gave a small wave. My mom's eyes filled with tears. She set the tin on the console table, bent down, asked if she could hug him. He hesitated, then shuffled forward. She hugged him gently. My dad ruffled his hair, told him he had gotten taller. Felix nodded, said he had in fact grown 3 centimeters since his last doctor's visit. My dad laughed in genuine delight. We sat in the living room, the small one with a second-hand sofa and the bookshelf Trent had put together. I had made hot drinks, set out some crackers and cheese on the coffee table. The conversation was awkward at first. Weather, Felix's current interests, my parents' neighbor getting a new roof. Then my dad cleared his throat, looked at me, then at Trent, then at Felix, who was curled up in the armchair with his headphones around his neck, drawing on a clipboard. My dad said they had listened to the recording again, that my mom had insisted, that they had talked, really talked, about what had been happening over the past year. He admitted they had failed us, that they had wanted so badly to pretend Naomi's behavior was just jokes or stress that they had ignored the impact on Felix and on me. He did not ask me to forgive them. He did not reach for excuses. He just named it. My mom nodded, eyes shining. She said she had been angry at me for a long time, longer than she wanted to admit, not just about this, but about other things, that she had always leaned on Naomi to interpret situations, that it had been easier than interrogating her own assumptions. She looked at Felix then, said she was sorry, directed it at him, not just at me. He looked up, blinked, said okay in that way kids do when they do not fully grasp the weight of what is being said but understand it is important, then went back to his drawing. They did not bring up mediation, did not ask me to reconsider the ban on Naomi, did not try to convince me she didn't mean it. They just sat in our small living room, accepting the rules of the space, using Felix's name without attaching any labels to it, talking to him about elevators and wind turbines and the new comic book series he liked. When they left 2 hours later, my mom hugged me at the door, whispered thank you for inviting us. My dad squeezed Trent's shoulder, told him he appreciated how fiercely he protected his family. It was not a perfect resolution, it did not erase the hurt, it did not magically make everything simple, but it was the first time I felt like my parents were seeing us, actually seeing us, without Naomi's commentary in their ears, and that changed the direction of everything that came after. Final update 1 year later. A year later, my son has not heard his aunt call him a monster again, my parents come to our house on our terms, and the space where Naomi used to be in my life has been filled with things that actually deserve to be there. After that tentative visit from my parents, we settled into a new pattern. They would come by every few weeks, sometimes together, sometimes just my dad dropping off something from their garden or my mom bringing over a book she thought Felix might like. They did not push, they did not bring up Naomi unless I did, and when I did, which happened now and then, they listened instead of defending her. They still love her, I can see that, but they have finally separated that love from automatic agreement. Naomi, on the other hand, has become more of a distant figure than I ever thought possible. We have not seen her in person since that Thanksgiving. She sent a couple of angry emails in the months after, accusing me of turning the family against her, of brainwashing Felix, of sharing the recording with outsiders. I did not respond to any of them. I forwarded one particularly dramatic one to Trent and to my parents, not for reaction, just so they could see how unhinged it had become. After that, the messages slowed, then stopped. I sometimes hear about her tangentially, through my parents or through old neighbors. She apparently changed jobs, moved into a different area of consulting, one that keeps her traveling more. My mom mentioned once, almost in passing, that Naomi had said she missed Felix, that she thought we were being unfair. I told my mom that when Naomi wanted to have an adult conversation where she took responsibility for her actions, she knew how to reach me, but until then, there was nothing to discuss. My mom nodded, did not argue. Felix has grown, of course, kids do that without asking permission. He is taller, his face more angular, he still flaps when he is excited, still loves elevators, but now he has added wind farms and train schedules to his list of fixations. He has a small group of friends from school who understand that sometimes he needs a break, that sometimes he needs to wear his headphones even if other people are not. We have worked with his teachers to make sure his classroom is a place where he is seen as a whole person, not a list of challenges. Last spring, our neighborhood association put out a call for volunteers to help with a weekend project at the old warehouse at the end of our street. The city had given them permission to turn one of the unused loading bays into a community play space, something simple, not a fancy playground, just a safe, enclosed spot where kids could climb, draw on chalkboard walls, play in a sand corner, that kind of thing. They wanted input from families on what would make it actually usable for different kids. Trent suggested we go to the planning meeting. It was held in the warehouse itself, concrete floor, high ceiling, echoey, but they had set up a few folding tables and brought in some portable lights, a big roll of paper on the wall for people to write ideas on. Felix was hesitant at first. The echo bothered him, but when he saw the blank paper and the markers laid out, his eyes lit up. He went straight to the wall and started drawing, not random lines, but a layout, ramps and platforms, quiet corners, a nook where someone could sit with a book away from the main area. The organizer, a woman from a few streets over named Tara, noticed. She came over, crouched down next to him, asked him to explain his design. He did, in great detail, hands gesturing, talking about how noise bounced in spaces like this, how some kids might need a break, how having a little tunnel with soft cushions could help. Tara listened like his words mattered, because they did. She took notes, asked follow-up questions. By the end of the meeting, she had incorporated a lot of his ideas into the initial plan. Over the next few months, Trent and I spent several Saturdays at that warehouse, helping paint, assembling donated equipment, hauling in carpet squares and old tires repurposed as climbing elements. Felix came too, wearing his headphones, taking breaks when he needed, but always coming back to see how things were progressing. He drew diagrams that the volunteers actually used, little sketches pinned to the bulletin board in the corner of the space. When the play area finally opened, on a bright afternoon with sunlight streaming across the concrete floor and kids' voices echoing off the high walls, Felix was one of the first through the door. He went straight to the quiet nook he had designed, crawled in, tested the angle, then came out and nodded, satisfied. Other kids immediately discovered it too, curling up with picture books, or just sitting there when the main area got too loud. My parents came to the opening. They stood in the doorway for a long time, watching their grandson move confidently through a space he had helped shape. My mom squeezed my hand, whispered that she was proud of him. I said I was too. She did not mention whether Naomi knew about any of this. I did not ask. A few weeks later, I ran into someone at the warehouse who, it turned out, worked in the same building as Naomi downtown. We were stacking some foam mats in a corner. She mentioned my last name, asked if I was related to a woman she knew from the corporate world. I felt my chest tighten for a second, then relaxed when she said the name without any obvious emotion. I told her yes, she was my sister. Bracing for whatever would come next, she shrugged, said she did not know her well, just that They had been in a couple of training sessions together, that she came across very sure of herself. I laughed, said that sounded about right. The woman smiled, changed the subject to the paint color on the walls. In that moment, I realized something that has stuck with me. Out in the broader world, Naomi is just another person, confident, maybe a bit much, but not the axis around which everything spins. The only place she had that kind of power was in our family, and even there, it only worked as long as everyone cooperated. Once we stopped, once we drew a line and enforced it, her orbit shifted. She became smaller in our daily lives, a name that comes up now and then, not a looming presence in every decision. I still have the audio file on my phone, tucked into a folder I rarely open, not because I want to relive it, but because it is part of the record of what happened, a reminder of why the boundary exists. Every once in a while, when doubt creeps in, when a relative makes a comment about how it is a shame you and Naomi do not talk, I remember the sound of her voice coming out of my dad's speaker, the silence around the table, Felix's question in the car afterward, and I know I did what I had to do. Last week, Felix and I walked down to the warehouse play space after dinner. The air outside was cool, the sky just starting to darken. Inside, the lights cast a warm glow on the chalk drawings and scuffed mats. There were a few kids there, climbing, laughing, a couple of parents chatting near the entrance. Felix went straight for the climbing structure in the middle, the one with the gentle ramp and the viewing platform. He stood at the top, looking down at the whole space, then over at me. He waved, grinning. I waved back, felt this wave of fierce, quiet joy. On the walk home, he slipped his hand into mine, something he does less often now that he is getting older. He told me the quiet nook had been full the whole time, that kids liked it. He sounded proud, not surprised, just matter of fact, as if of course something he had designed would work the way it was supposed to. I squeezed his hand, told him he had good ideas. He nodded, then launched into a detailed explanation of how he wanted to adjust the ramp so kids using mobility aids could get up more easily. My mind flashed, just for a second, to Naomi, to the word she had used for him so often, and then the image dissolved, replaced by the reality of the boy next to me, solid and warm and very much not what she had tried to make him feel like. By the time we reached our house, the street lights were on, our front window glowed softly. Trent opened the door as we came up the walk, asked how the play space was. Felix answered before I could, talking over himself with excitement, describing everything in detail. I stood there on the threshold for a moment, listening to his voice fill the entryway, and I realized that for the first time in a long time, home did not feel like a place I had to defend from my own family. It just felt like ours.